Bridget Coleman, you are here to stand trial for the crime of writing an angsty Draco Malfoy fanfiction when you were 12? How do you plead?
Guilty. There, I said it. I wrote fanfiction. When you hear the word fanfiction, what do you think of? Do you think of that one infamous Harry Styles story that has accumulated over 60 million reads on Wattpad and has been turned into a 4-part movie series produced by Netflix? Or maybe you think of the Draco Malfoy stories that you read or even wrote when you were a preteen obsessed with the Harry Potter books, movies, and cast. However you think of the word, fanfiction has made a definite impact on teen culture and how we think about writing and the publishing industry as a whole. Some would call it an embarrassing hobby. To read or even write fanfiction would be something to be frowned upon, something that you do in the late hours of the night, hidden under the covers of your bed, computer screen illuminating the darkness of a childhood bedroom hidden away from society. When you hear about sites like Wattpad and AO3, some may think it's just a cesspool of teenage girls writing fantasies about Harry Styles and BTS. And while part of that may be true, and there's definitely some questionable and weird stuff that people post on the internet, the idea and drive behind writing fanfiction is so much more than that. You can't tell me that you've never wanted to insert yourself into a book that you read as a child or even as an adult. There's no age limit on dreaming. I'm sure that every single one of us have become so obsessed with a particular TV show or book series that we've desperately wanted to become a part of that universe. That happened with me, with both Marvel, Harry Potter, and Percy Jackson, The Hunger Games, all amazing stories that I loved and still love to this day. So imagine my happiness when I found out that people were actually writing stories where they were making their own original characters, or OCs if you want to get in with fanfiction lingo, and then putting them into these worlds that I already loved. I was overjoyed to see that people were reimagining parts of the Harry Potter series and twisting things so that the characters like Sirius Black and Fred Weasley didn't actually die. I love the idea of creating your own demigod character and throwing them into Camp Half-Blood to see what kinds of wacky adventures you could send them on. After discovering these communities and this kind of writing, I eagerly began my own fanfiction career. I began writing my own Harry Potter story centered around a relationship with Draco Malfoy. Ew! And when I tell you, this is the most insane thing I've ever written. There's literally no words for this thing. I never finished it, but the ideas that my brain came up with at the age of what? 12? 13 at most? I'm going to have to make a video where I read this to you guys because it is literally unreal. I was definitely unwell. Not because I was writing fanfiction, mind you, but because of how dark it was. I really want to know what 12-year-old me was thinking. Also because I didn't even like Draco as a love interest. I just thought he was an interesting and complex character, and I liked that about him, but I never liked him, if you know what I mean. I thought he was a racist, classist bully with a botched redemption arc that never really panned out. Anyways, I digress. And while I have to admit that this writing was definitely not my best work, in fact, far from it, as time went on I found I started to improve. My paragraphs became easier to read, the flow of events became much less choppy, and my dialogue seemed to flow so much better. That brings me to one of my points. Fanfiction is an amazing way for people wanting to get into writing to hone their skills and improve the quality of their writing. One of the hardest things about creative writing is world building. Coming up with a unique and diverse cast of characters and original setting is one of the hardest things about writing a book. Coming up with an engaging plot is already hard enough, so if the world is already made for you, you can really focus on making the plot of the story as interesting as possible. If people are reading your Harry Potter fanfiction, they already know the rules of the world, how the magic system works, and what all the book-specific lingo means. So you don't have to spend time explaining what a portkey or an elder wand is to your readers. They already know how the world works, so you don't have to go into the laws of the wizarding world or the magic system. You already have a cast of developed or developing characters that you can work with and an overarching plot that you just have to fit your specific storyline into. The only thing that you really have to work on is your fanfiction's specific plot and developing your OC. I've begun to view well-written fanfictions not as just something a fan made up, but rather an extension of the original story. The most popular and most read fanfiction on the website AO3 is a Marauders fanfiction by the name of All the Young Dudes, told from the perspective of a 𝐼𝐻𝐽. It centers around the Marauders, which, if you aren't a chronically online fangirl, I will explain to you now. The Marauders consist of James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, and a host of other characters like Lily Evans, all of whom served large parts in the original Harry Potter book series, but are accompanied by those who are mentioned once in throwaway lines, and never had their stories expanded upon by She Who Shall Not Be Named. All the Young Dudes is heralded as the fanfiction to end all fanfictions. If anyone hasn't read it and thinks that they want to, I am begging you to please read this book. I am speaking of this with more certainty than I have ever spoken about anything. This is better than the original books. There's so much more diversity, with the main character, Remus, being gay and in a relationship with Sirius Black, along with so many other characters being people of color and a whole myriad of sexualities. It's so good. It touches on issues like homophobia and the blood racism well known to the Harry Potter universe just so well and so sensitively. Characters are just so lovable and so well developed, and it really is just a masterpiece. And it fits in seamlessly with the canon while still being a brilliant standalone and a wonderful original take on the series and these well-loved characters. Well-written fanfictions do exist, and when they do, they add more interest to the source material by focusing on characters that the original series didn't pay much attention to. One of the best Percy Jackson fanfictions I've ever read has a love interest of Connor Stoll, a character who didn't get the most attention in the original book series, and this fanfiction made me appreciate the character so much more when I reread the canon, having been exposed to him in an additional capacity where he served a more central role. Websites like Wattpad and AO3 have also changed the way we think about publishing. No longer do authors have to find a publisher willing to take a risk on their book and go through the long and grueling process of publishing the physical copy. Anyone can now make an account, write a few chapters, and publish their story bit by bit as they complete it. Places like Wattpad promote the idea that anyone can be an author, something that I think we should really be encouraging. We need more young people interested in literature and writing, and self-publishing websites can be a great place to start and build an audience. I'd like to shout out a friend of mine, Emma Smith, who I met on Wattpad and has gone on to publish 5 of her books through Amazon. She writes the most incredible young adult fiction set in the UK, and she has so much talent and all the capability to become a massive sensation. I'll leave the links to purchase her books in the description box and the comments, so please, if you are interested, check her books out. And if you read any of her work, make sure to leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads, as it is a really way to support a small author. Sites like these make people's fanfictions more easily accessible and really help to create a community surrounding a fandom. The last installment of the Harry Potter series, the movie Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, came out in 2011, and yet the fandom is still booming, feeding off of fanfictions rather than the original books and movies, because let's be honest, this was not it. And while the Percy Jackson movies were terrible and the books, we just got a new one this year, but there hadn't been anything for a while, fanfiction continued to feed fans new content for over a decade. Despite the benefits I've just listed and the simple fun that comes along with enjoying fanfiction, there's still this stigma around it, that one should be ashamed of reading fanfiction or writing these sorts of stories. And I want to take a moment to discuss this and really give my analytical 2 cents. The main writers and readers of fanfiction are tweens, teenage girls, women in their early 20s. The majority of AO3 users are fresh out of college, while Wattpad generally has a younger teenage audience. And if there's one universal truth about being a teenage girl, it is that there's literally nothing you can do, nothing you can like, without being made fun of and torn to shreds. Name one thing that a teenage girl can do and not get tormented for. Oh wait, that's right, you can't think of anything.
But imagine how tired we are. Imagine how tired we are of it.
It is very telling about our culture that fanfiction is often torn to shreds in YouTube videos and TikTok comments and in articles across the internet, and the main driving force behind this industry is teenage girls. It literally reeks of misogyny. There's not really another take here. 𝐿𝐴 Bacon Smith, who is now an author of several series of paranormal romances, slay, got her start with Star Trek fan fiction and fan art. She wrote to the New York Times back in the 80s stating that male fans of the show generally balk at the restriction and prefer to engage in activities such as costuming or crafts, for which payment is not a traditional reward. Women, who traditionally spend large portions of their lives working in relative isolation for little or no pay, bring a different set of motivations to their writing and art. They want to talk to other women, to express themselves in the science fiction form that until recently has all but excluded them. The writers cannot sell their work, but they don't have to meet commercial criteria for success either. They must please only the predominantly female Star Trek fan community. Basically, men don't want to write for free. And what she says is so true, and it makes sense when popular media and popular culture mainly focus on stories about men, that women should want to carve out a space for themselves within fan culture. Fan fiction got its start with the release of the original Star Trek, a show that featured mainly male characters. Despite the strides we've made when it comes to gender equality in media, these spaces are still considered men's spaces, especially amongst fandoms such as Star Trek, Marvel, and Star Wars. It makes perfect sense that women should want to have some representation inside these universes that they know and love. Like 𝐿𝐴 said, men don't write fan fiction because they don't have to. They already have characters that they can cosplay as and make costumes because they are already a part of the story. It is considered the standard for them to be part of the story. But with many of these stories, there isn't that space for women, so of course they would turn to writing and create a female space within these fandoms. But there's another fear that comes with fan fiction writing, or with being a fangirl in general, specifically when it comes to being a fan of media. This same worry is not expressed when talking about the much more violent superfans of sports teams who start riots or create AI-generated revenge of Taylor Swift in response to a lost game. To quote a Vox article I read for research, as I could not phrase this better, adult men crying and engaging in acts of physical violence over sports is expected. People crying over a TV show is weird. Women writing stories where Kirk and Spock are more than just friends is not only weird, but disgusting and dangerous too. There's a sort of pearl clutching that happens when discussing teenage girls expressing their feelings in the written medium of fanfiction, even though this is a perfectly normal and healthy way of exploring love and sexuality, especially when you're too young to be actually going out and having sex. Girls becoming awakened to these topics is considered a moral wrong, and therefore liking these things, consuming this media, is morally wrong. Female sexuality is talked about in such a contradictory way, especially in our modern media. It's to be exploited for the pleasure of men, but it's also something to be safeguarded, saved for marriage, if you will. There's this idea that fan fiction is the filthy desires of corrupted teenage girls, when really it is in fact the opposite. Fan fiction offers a safe way for teenage girls to learn about and explore sex and relationships at their own pace. Considering the state of sex education in schools, I can promise you that most teenage girls are learning about sex more from the things they read, especially considering how taboo talking about female sexuality is and how much it's swept under the rug in the larger sex education conversation. Fanfiction is many teenage girls' first dip into the toes of the world of sex and relationships. So why shouldn't they be allowed to learn about these things in the context of their favorite wizard or boy band member? Why shouldn't they be allowed to learn about these topics in a way that feels safe to them? Isn't that what we should want? Shouldn't they learn from the writing of an older teenage girl with the distance between computer screens separating them than having an unpleasant or dangerous first experience because they had no prior knowledge of sexual safety and consent before going into that situation? Reading and writing fan fiction is not an embarrassing hobby, but a way for people to explore their feelings and develop their writing skills. If kids want to write a story of themselves on a date with Peter Parker, let them. Let them do that without feeling like they have to hide their hobby, because that's what fan fiction writing is, a hobby. If publishing on a publish-as-you-go site encourages teens to write and build the habit of doing so on a routine basis, we're establishing a new generation of authors who already have the discipline of an experience of writing and appealing to an audience. A lot of established authors have admitted that they started off with writing fan fictions and then went on to write their own stories. We need to remove the stigma around fan fiction and allow people to explore their own ideas through the worlds that they love, and to explore themes of relationships, love, and sex in these environments that they're already familiar with. And finally, to quote Sam Wolfson, who in his article written in 2012 for The Guardian summed up this entire video better than I could, fan fiction is making teenagers better writers and better satirists, and allowing them to explore sexuality in a way decided by them rather than dictated by the entertainment industry. A purity ring doesn't carry much meaning when Ron Weasley is pulling it off with his teeth.
Child. Anyway, so
thank you for watching. Subscribe to support your local fan fiction author, and I'll see you in another video. Bye, guys.
Oh, my father will hear about this.